Welcome to a presentation on Enhancement Framework in SAP NetWeaver 2004S. My name is Venky Narayanan. I'm a product manager with SAP NetWeaver US Product Management team. At the end of this session, you will understand what is Enhancement Framework and Switch Framework, which is available in the SAP NetWeaver 2004S, which is a minor release of SAP NetWeaver, which is under ramp up now. And you can also understand how to reduce the total cost of ownership by using the new enhancement technologies instead of modifying the SAP supply code. And you will also know how to enhance the standard SAP objects and how you can even create enhancement definitions if needed. Here is the agenda. We will have some motivation and overview slides, and then we will see what is Enhancement Framework and what are the technologies available under the Enhancement Framework, namely source code plugin, function group enhancement, class or interface enhancement. And then the next section is on kernel body. Technically, this is also part of Enhancement Framework since kernel body is a significant topic. I have included that as a separate section. And finally, we will see what is Switch Framework and how that helps in combining multiple industry solutions and then delivering a single software to the customers. Okay, to start with the motivation and overview. And before starting that, let us have some positioning slides on under what IT practice and scenario the current scenario variant comes under. We used to have the component-based NetWeaver, the refrigerator, the famous refrigerator slide, which is being sliced into IT practices instead of presenting the NetWeaver as components. Right now, we are, going into the customer's shoes, and then from their point of view, trying to analyze the problem and approach it. So we have different IT practices, and so we will use one or more of these components in each IT practice. And the Enhancement Framework comes under the IT practice called Custom Development. These are the IT practices and IT scenarios under each practice, and as you can see, custom development is an IT practice, and under that we have the IT scenario called developing, configuring and adapting applications. And Enhancement Framework is part of developing, configuring and adapting applications in the ABAP stack. Adapting SAP software. SAP being a global software provider is able to provide software that are adaptable by customer, because no single software can accommodate all the needs of different customers in various verticals, industries and other applications. So in SAP typically we have three kinds of adaptations possible. The first and foremost is customizing. SAP provides the implementation guide, SPR or transaction in ABAP, using which you can customize the SAP software, and typically this is done without any coding, required coding. And this is pretty much table driven, and everything is controlled using the customizing transactions. And if that is not possible, we have something called enhancements. We will see that in detail in this presentation, what was available and how it has been enhanced and a betterment is made. And finally, if that's also not possible, of course we have something called modification or core mod. Customers are discouraged to do it because it is high maintenance, and the overhead is more on maintaining these modifications, because the customer is going to change the SAP supply code directly. So when a patch or a support pack or upgrade is done, this code could potentially be overwritten by the new code supplied by SAP. So motivation, mainly this is to reduce the total cost of ownership, because as I said, modification takes a lot more effort, and the disadvantages are, multiple users and projects are not supported, and also parallel development is not possible because the customers will be changing the same piece of code. Even if there are multiple projects or multiple departments trying to change the same code, they have to work among themselves, and parallel development is not possible. Also, higher adjustment effort during upgrade and SP import. Let's quickly take a look at the old ways of enhancing the ABAP system. The good old user exits, which are basically form or subroutines being called from standard SAP code, and these forms are typically stored in an include program, and the customers can go in and put their own code in these user exits. Though the include is SAP under the SAP namespace, SAP knows that this should not be overwritten. And then the function module based call customer function or customer exits came in. This is a better way to handle the enhancement than the user exit. That's because it's based on function module, and so the code is separately available in a function module under the customer namespace in an include program. And then finally, Badis, the first object-oriented enhancement concept. These are called classic Badis or old Badis. We will see how this is being made faster and taken to the kernel level in the new enhancement framework. So just to give you a chronology of all the old enhancement technologies and how that came into the new technology or made a path to the new one. We have three levels. The bottommost, the green one, is kernel level, that is at the language level, and then the middle one, the blue one, is workbench, the ABAP workbench layer, and the top one is applications, for example the materials management or finance or financials, or plant maintenance, and even it could be the other CRM, SRM applications. So the user exits were provided by the applications, we saw that, and then came the customer exits, which are implemented at the kernel level using call customer function, and then the actual enhancement implementations are done by the customer at the workbench level in the form of function modules. And then we also have something called business transaction events, which are primarily used in the FICO world, provided by the application. And then we have the Badis, which are purely object-oriented implementations. So they are the old classic Badis are implemented in the workbench using classes. The implementation is done using classes, and the Badi definition is also done in workbench. And now the new enhancement framework is available at the kernel level. That means we have new ABAP statements as part of the enhancement framework, and also the Badis are taken to the kernel level, so now it's called kernel Badis, and so we have a few ABAP statements to support it, and it's much faster than the old classic Badis. Okay, having said that, we will see what is enhancement framework now. Whenever we talk about enhancements, we have two parts. One is defining or providing a definition to the enhancement, typically done by SAP, which is the left hand side, and then when that is given to the customer would typically implement the enhancement and have their own implementation or the code, which is implied on the right hand side. So we have four new terminologies in the new enhancement technology. I want to introduce you to these four terms. The first one is called simple enhancements part, or simply the enhancements part, and that is provided by typically by SAP, and could be implemented using a simple enhancement implementation. And the relationship is many to many. That means for a single spot you can have multiple implementation and vice versa. And you also have something called a composite enhancements part, which is a placeholder for grouping simple enhancements parts, and also you can have you can group composite enhancements parts into a global or a umbrella composite enhancement part. And similarly, the enhancement implementation on the right hand side also has something called composite enhancement implementation, which is nothing but a grouping of multiple simple enhancement implementations or even other composite enhancement implementations. So we have 4 terminologies now. Enhancements part is for definition, and enhancement implementation is for implementing it. And as I said, typically the definition is provided by SAP and the implementation is done by the customer. That's need not be always the case. For example, the definition could be provided by the core development team in SAP, and even the implementation could be provided by the add-on development or industry solutions. And on the other hand, even the customer, as I said earlier, can develop enhancements parts. For example, if it's a global customer and they have a global central development team who can create enhancements parts or definitions, and it could be implemented by the local geographic development teams. For example, North America could have their own implementation of a certain company, and Australian division can have their own implementation. Okay, giving another big picture of the same stuff. The definition on the overall, you have composite enhancements part, and then that can contain multiple simple enhancements part. And what is contained in a simple enhancements part? Those are called enhancement options. For example, a Badi definition could be an option, and the other types of source code enhancements, or function group and class enhancements or other types of enhancement options. And talking about implementation, you have composite enhancement implementation, and under that simple enhancement implementations. And the simple enhancement implementation can have one or more implementation elements. The elements could be something like implementing a body. Of course, since we are still talking about theory, it'll be a little hazy, and probably you are still imagining on the thin air. Once we take a look at how these technologies are actually implemented, then it'll be very clear for you. Here is an example, a real-life example. The SAP provides in SD pricing an enhancement option called a pricing kind of the good old user exit, but this now it's called enhancement option for enhancements part in the SD pricing module, and the customer could implement that. Okay, now where do I go and search for these enhancements? If you're talking about the classic Badis, you would be looking at the SE18 transaction and the implementations in SE19, and in case of the classic enhancements, the old enhancements, you would be looking at SMod for definitions, and then CMod for implementation projects. But in the new enhancement concept or enhancement framework, everything is integrated into the SE80 transaction. So in SE80 we have a new browser called Enhancement Info System. There you can go and look at all the enhancement spots, both simple and composite, and implementations at a central place. And we have something called a spot editor and implementation editor. So if you want to create something, you can do it right there in SE80. On the other hand, you can also create these enhancements parts and implementations wherever you are implementing or you are defining. For example, these editors are integrated into, for example, the editor, ABAP editor. In ABAP editor, if you want to create a definition, you can still do it. You need not come to SE80. Okay, let's take a look at the individual technologies. The first one is source code plugin. Source code plugin is mainly for modification-free enhancement of source code. Wherever you see the ABAP source code, and if you want to enhance it, you use something called source code enhancement. And there are two types of source code enhancements. One is called implicit, and the other one is explicit. The implicit ones are already available everywhere at the predefined stages in the source code. For example, you take any executable program, any report program. At the end of the executable program, or as the last line of the executable program, or the last line of an include or function group or dialog module, you have implicit enhancement options which can be implemented by the customer. So the customer can go ahead and write their own code at the end of any report program. That is not considered a modification, but it's an enhancement. Similarly, at the beginning and end of any form, wherever you see form, end form, at the beginning of the form as the first executable statement, and also right before the end form, the customer can implement the implicit enhancement option, and similarly for function modules and also methods. And similarly, wherever there is a structure definition, begin of, end of, at the end of the structure, the customer can implement and add their own fields to the structure. Similarly, for local classes, at the end of each section, private, protected, and public. So these are called implicit enhancement options. So what about explicit? Explicit, as the name says, unless the SAP provides it, the customer will not be able to implement it. So there are at predefined places, SAP provides these explicit enhancement options. Let's take an example of take a look at the example of implicit enhancement option. For example, here, if you want to know what are the implicit enhancement options or points available in a given program, all you have to do is in the editor, go to enhancement operations, show all implicit enhancements, and so you will get these comment lines. And at the right side of the comment line, you can find out these enhancement the implicit enhancement options correspond to what place. So for example, the top one right here, that is the last line of an include program, and the bottom one right here, that is the beginning of a method, end of a method, or end of a section, a protected and private section also. So similarly, the list, you saw the list in the previous slide. So these implicit enhancement options are available everywhere. It's omnipresent. So now you can understand the power of the new enhancement technology. Talking about the explicit enhancement options, we have two new ABAP statements for explicit enhancement options called enhancement point and enhancement section. If SAP is providing a single statement which can be implemented by customer typically, and the customer can add their own code at this point, that is called enhancement point. On the other hand, enhancement section is a set of statements. If SAP feels that a set of statements would most likely be rewritten or redefined by the customer, then that set of statements will be provided within the enhancement section in enhancement section. If that is done so, then a customer can have their own implementation of this section. So whenever there is an active implementation of this section, then the standard code will not be executed, and only the active implementation will be executed. So this is new. This is brand new, the concept of enhancement section, because you never had any kind of enhancement in the old days where you can say I don't want to execute this piece of code provided by SAP. whereas it is now possible to do that using enhancement section. And for this reason, you can have only one active implementation of enhancement section, whereas you can have any number of active implementations of enhancement point, and all those implementations will be executed if you have multiple implementations for enhancement point. And this is called source code plugin technology by implementing the enhancement explicit enhancement points. And in this example, enhancement point is being implemented by two implementations by the customer. For example, here you have hello Paris and hello London, and if both are active, both will be printed. If one of them is active, one will be printed. Again, these are switched by switch framework, switchable by switch framework. So based on the status of the switch, either or both could be active, both of these implementations. Whereas the section, enhancement section, you have write original, and that is being implemented as write enhanced. So when you execute this program, if this section is active, section implementation is active, then the write original will not be executed, whereas the write enhanced will be executed and printed. And we have a new mode called change enhancement mode. You see the spiral sign here, that is called change enhancement mode. So whenever you are implementing any enhancement, you have to get into this change enhancement mode. You should not be in display mode or change mode. Of course, if you are enhancing standard SAP supply code, you will not be in change mode because you don't want to do a core mod or modification. So you will be in this change enhancement mode, which is a new mode. Due to lack of time, we are skipping all the demos, and the demos will be made available as separate recordings. And if you are interested in knowing or getting these recordings and where and when it will be available, please shoot me an email. My email ID is available in the very first screen. My name is Venkata Varadadesigan, so first name dot last name at sap.com. Okay, moving ahead, we now know what is source code plugin. Now let's see what is function group enhancement. It's very, very simple concept. With this function group enhancement, what you can do is you will be able to add new optional parameters to any standard function module. Think about it. If you see any BAPI, for example, all BAPIs are pretty much function modules, and if you see any standard SAP provided application function modules, you will be able to add new parameters to it. And this is not considered a modification, but you are just enhancing the function group or function module. Okay. And of course, as I said, it has to be an optional parameter, because if you could make a mandatory parameter, all the existing calls will fail. So that's why you can only add new optional parameters. So with the combination of this enhancement group, the function group enhancement, and the implicit source code enhancement, you can enhance any BAPI. You know how difficult it is to add new parameters to the BAPI and then manipulate those parameters. You would typically clone the BAPIs, right? But now that's not needed. Maintaining those cloned BAPI is a nightmare, and it takes a lot of effort. And also, modification is not a good practice if you have some way of doing enhancement, right? So with this function group enhancement, you can do it. But just a word of caution, since now you have lots of these options, how do you control it? That becomes a challenge, right? Because since implicit, especially the implicit enhancement options are omnipresent, that is probably you can even think that as as a negative one, but we will see that later at the end of the presentation. Finally, the class enhancement. the global class or interface can be enhanced in the following ways. You can add optional parameters to any existing method. You can even add new methods, create new methods. You can add events and event handlers, and you have something called pre-exits, post-exits, and override exits. That is, if you have a method before executing the method and after executing the method, if you want, you can have your own code to be called, and that is called pre-exit and post-exit. You also have something called override exit, and this will override the definition of the original method, and the new override exit will be invoked instead of the old method. Okay, this is how you add new method. All you have to do is go to the global class, edit it in SE 80 or SE 24, and then be in the modification mode, and then you can add new methods, and you can similarly add optional parameters at the end of the method. And this is what I was talking about, the pre-exit and post-exit. For example, if you have a method called Hugo, and if you have a pre-exit, the pre-exit will be invoked before invoking the method, and if you have a post-exit, after executing the method, your post-exit code will be executed. Kernel body technology. What are bodies? Bodies are object-oriented enhancement concepts, and it's an anticipated point of extension from the standard SAP code. These could be executed, and the bodies could be implemented in the classic way as global classes. And let's see how it is done in the new kernel bodies. The new kernel bodies are directly integrated into the runtime and ABAP language environment. So these are real fast compared to the old classic bodies, and you have much improved filter. You can even define complex filter conditions, and these are reusable in nature. You have something called a stateful body. So using this, the body instances that you instantiate at one place can be reused in a subsequent place in the execution, which is not possible in the old way. And of course, these kernel bodies are switchable using switch framework, and it is part of the new enhancement framework. Just like a source code or global class and function group enhancement, even kernel body is also a kind of enhancement technology. Let's compare the old classic body and the new body. The old body used to have something called the exit handler. You used to provide the body name and the filter condition. For example, right here, the filter name and the filter value is provided right here. X equals 10 is a parameter, and the filter value is FLT. That's what is provided. So the actual implementation selection and the actual call is mixed here. So because of this, the body implementations could be determined only at the runtime, and due to that fact, a database access is a must at runtime. That is, selecting the actual body implementation and then executing those. So that's why these are the old classic bodies are a little slower, and the new body is integrated into the language. You have two new ABAP statements called get body and call body. And get body, at the time of doing a get body, you supply the filter condition, and then the call body, you just supply the parameters. And the new kernel bodies are much faster because there are no database access done at the runtime. Everything is done at the compile time. How is it possible? That's because the actual implementations, all the active implementations are compiled and included in the load of the body handle at the compile time. That's why at runtime it doesn't have to know what are the active implementations. It already knows it at the compile time, and so it just executes it. And even the filters are converted into complex if statements. So even executing or choosing the filters is very fast. It's just a matter of executing those if statements. So bottom line, the new kernel bodies are much faster than the old classic bodies. And as I said, the kernel bodies are switchable using the switch framework, and the bodies are, of course, an enhancement is part of the enhancement framework, and enhancement, it's an enhancement technology. So for example, on the left hand side you have the body definition, exactly similar to the source code definition, source code plugin. You have the body definitions as part of the enhancements part, and then you implement those body implementations which are basically part of the enhancement implementation, which could be part of the package. For example, in this case package A, and the package could be switched using switch framework. So the basic difference is in order to have both the body definition and body implementation, you have to have the enhancements part and enhancement implementation. Without using an enhancements part and enhancement implementation, you will not be able to define a body and implement the body. This is how you create the body. There is a body definition editor under SE80. So all you have to do is in SE80, under the package you're working with, create an enhancements part, and then create a body definition, and then provide the interface name which is used as a template for the body, and then define all the filter values. Similarly, the body implementations, the first step is typically done by SAP, and the second step, which is implementing the body, is typically done by the customers or consultants at the customer site. So the body implementations are also done in SE80. Exactly, go to the specific enhancements part, and then just click on the implement button, and then do the implementation. And of course you have to create an implementation class and also provide the filter values for the filter conditions. And that doesn't mean that the customers will not be able to create body definitions. Of course, as I said earlier, if they want, the customers can also create body definitions to be implemented by the different project teams. Okay, here are some of the advanced features. Of course, I'm just going to mention those features, and you know, in order to go into the depth of these features, it'll take a lot more time. So I'm just going to touch upon those. We have something called default implementations. In case if filter condition is not satisfied, or you know, the implementations are not active, you can have something called a default implementation, which could be executed irrespective of the filter condition and the active implementations. We also have something called implementation inheritance. It's a pure object-oriented concept, and you can inherit the implementing class and reuse those classes, inherited classes. And as I mentioned earlier, we have something called stateful bodies. Stateful bodies are you can instantiate the instance, the body instance, at one point, and then reuse those at a subsequent body call. That is called stateful body, and that is an attribute when you create the body definition, whether you want it to be stateful or stateless. And you also have something called context. If you want to have stateful bodies but controlled by a context could be you know, you can have multiple instances based on a country or based on several other conditions. So if you want to have multiple instances based on certain context, then that's also possible using the context. Okay, so how do I go about what happens to the old bodies? Is it possible to convert the old bodies to new ones? Yes, it's possible. If you want to convert the old body definitions, since the technology itself is different, in order to do a complete migration, you have to delete the old one and then recreate it, which is typically done by the SAP application team. And if the customer has created any old bodies, they have to convert it to the new one. And you also have something called an automatic migration. In SE 18 itself, the old classic Badi definition editor, you have an option to migrate it to the new one. All you have to do is go to utilities and click on the migrate, and it will be automatically converted. And here's a little comparison. If you consider classic Badi would take one unit of time, or certain unit of time, the migrated bodies are of course not like the new body, because the calling place is not going to be changed, only the definition part is going to be changed. So it is little faster than the classic bodies, 2 times to 27 times faster. But of course the new bodies, completely fully converted bodies, or fully newly created kernel bodies, are much faster, around 40 times to 600 times faster than the old classic bodies. Okay, we are in the final stage. The last chapter is switch framework. What are switch framework and why do we need switch framework? This is basically to control the visibility of repository objects at runtime. You know how typically in the ABAP server the repository objects are either present or not present. It cannot be in an intermediate stage. And the switch framework is mainly created for industry solution, to support industry solutions and enterprise add-ons. Using the switch framework, it is now possible to have a single software containing all the industry solutions and supply this single software to the customer, be it ERP or MySAP Business Suite, starting with MySAP ERP 2005 and MySAP ERP 2000, MySAP Business Suite 2005, which are based on the SAP NetWeaver 2004S. It is now possible to deliver a single software for the ERP or Business Suite, and then the customer would activate which industry solution they want to have. Of course, that is bound by the licensing, and technically it's not activating the industry solution, it is activating something called a business function set, which we will see in the subsequent slides. So what are the benefits? The benefit is the delivery is made faster. All the industry solutions are available with every release, and there is no delay in delivering the SPs, and also there is no longer a need for CRTs, and so the synchronization cycles and planning is done much better using the switch framework. Switchable objects, we have something called switch, and if the switch is active, the corresponding repository object will be active. If the switch is not active, the corresponding repository object is as good as non-existent. So the switch can be controlled by in two ways. One is called package assignment. The switch can be assigned to a package, and then whatever is associated to the package, the following items, could be active or inactive. And on the other hand, the switch can be used to control directly certain repository objects, and this is called direct assignment. So using the package assignment, what are the objects that you can control? The append structures, the SI and CI customer includes in case of data dictionary structures, and in domains you have fixed value appends, and any secondary index assigned to a package is switchable, and the appends for search helps, and of course enhancement implementations, all the technologies, the 4 technologies we have seen today, those are switchable. And then you have the BC sets, the business configuration sets are switchable using the package assignment. So what are switchable by direct assignment? Screen elements and flow logic. If you have a screen element, if you assign it to a switch, if the switch is not active, you won't see that screen element at the execution time. Similarly, menu entries, functions, IMG nodes, configuration, that's customizing. Here is an example of direct assignment. In case of screen painter, in the module statement you have something called, you have an option to specify the switch. So on the left hand side, if you see that screenshot, module OIH lookup, you have an option to specify the switch. So if the switch is active, only when the switch is active, that module will be executed. Similarly, the right top, you have the in the same screen painter, the field elements. So for each field element you have a option to mention the switch, and you also have something called reaction to the switch. That is, if the switch is active, what do you want to do? Do you want to display that field or hide the field? So you have 2 options. Similarly, in case of menu painter, the function code could be either active or inactive, that is not displayed based on the status of a switch. Okay, here is the overall architecture of the switch. So far we have been talking about switch framework. So how is it achieved? We have 3 new terms. One is called the switch, which is the lowermost transportable object. And we have something called business functions, which is a group of switches. And you have something called business function set, which is a group of business functions. So the business function set can be conceived as an industry solutions, an IS. For example, IS oil could be a business function set combining multiple functions of the IS oil. In the form of business functions, for example, upstream functions and downstream functions, and the other functions. So technically it is possible to include business functions of other industry solutions, because in this way we don't define something called an industry solutions. In switch framework we just define everything as business functions. For example, a retail function. A retail function could be a functionality of IS retail industry solution, but it's technically possible to include it in an active business function set, but the customer could be an IS oil customer. But of course all these things are bound by the licensing, and right now it's it's not decided whether to provide this enable the power of switching or creating switches, and whether the customer can go ahead and mix and match the business functions from different industry solutions. So check with the account executive, and check with the decision of the management at the time of your implementation if you have any doubts. So here is an example. We have certain switches, switch 1, 2, 3, 4. Some of the switches are assigned to packages, and some are directly assigned to repository objects, and these switches are again in turn assigned to business functions, and some business functions are active. So if the business function is active, those switches are active. If the business function is not active, the switches are not active, and so all the packages and the direct assigned repository objects are also not active. Okay, so we have seen 3 new terms in switch framework: switch, business function, and business function set. So in order to create a switch or take a look at the properties of a switch, the transaction you would use is SFW1, and in case of business function, SFW2, And in SFW2 you will be able to get a list of all switches under that switch business function. And of course, for business function set, there are two transactions. One transaction is to create and maintain the business function set, that is SFW3, and of course another transaction, SFW5, is to activate the business function set. And at any customer site, you will be able to activate the business function set in a system only once. You cannot go back, you cannot undo once you activate the business function set. So you have to be very, very careful. And all these transactions, the SFW1, 2, 3 and 5, you are basically activating a bunch of repository objects. So at the time of executing this transaction, it wouldn't know the amount of time it's going to take. So the activation is not done online. A job is submitted, and you have to be very careful about what's going on, how many users or background jobs are running at the time of executing these transactions. So especially in SFW5, where you are basically activating the business function set, it's equivalent to pretty much importing an add-on or an industry solution. So you can imagine the amount of work done in the system. So typically for activating the business function set, you would disable all the users and stop all the batch jobs, and then run this SFW5 transaction. Okay, so we are at the end of the presentation. Just to summarize, the enhancement framework offers new possibilities. There are new enhancement technologies called source code plugin, function group, class enhancement, and new Badi, the kernel Badi technology. And the kernel Badis are much more flexible and faster than the old ones. And the enhancement framework is switchable using switch framework. And one last word, you have seen the power of the enhancement technologies, right? Especially the implicit enhancement option that is omnipresent. You can do a lot more with that. So with greater power comes great responsibility. So you have to handle it very wisely and choose which technology you want to go with. So my personal best practice recommendation would be to go with the Badis. If a Badi is provided by SAP, then go with that. That's the best option. And if the Badi is not available, typically you would go with the explicit source code plugin, because SAP, that is expected by SAP to be implemented by a customer. And also, if that's also not possible, if not a suitable one is available, you can try to, the third option would be to go with the class enhancement and function group enhancement, and keep the implicit source code enhancement as a last resort just before doing a core mod or modification. Of course, that is still better than doing modification, because in modification, when you do the upgrade or import SPs, you would lose the code. It's going to be overwritten, so you have to do some extra effort, put on extra effort to manage that. But even the implicit source code enhancement is anyway it is an enhancement, so it can be better managed. So remember these tips, and go with choosing the enhancement options wisely. And finally, some additional information, you can go to the help portal. The new enhancement framework documentation is available there. And for internal SAP folks, you can go to RKT-NetWeaver, and the RKT or OKP material is available. For ramp-up customers, the same OKP material could be made available for limited licensing. You can send an email to rkt@sap.com if you want to get hold of these OKP. And contacts, the PM contacts, the product management contacts for ABAP topics. Venky, that's me. I'm the product manager in charge of ABAP topics in US, and Dirk Feeken is the product manager in Waldorf, and you can contact him too. And that's the end of our presentation, and thanks a lot for attending, and hope it was very helpful for you, and hope you would use it in your project. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email or call me anytime. Thank you. Bye-bye.